Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by The Plain Truth. How you doing, Travis?
I'm good.
Beep, beep. Well, it's going to be a very, very easy and quick housekeeping with just you and I here.
Know,
so.
right? Yeah, right.
Should be easy. Let's see if the audio holds in. Any signs of curvature?
None whatsoever.
Any signs of axial rotation?
Same answer.
Would that be a no?
None whatsoever.
Man, I didn't even have to confirm that it was of the Earth-based variety. Well, I suppose I have done by saying that. But
I know how easy this is.
I got my answer first. Any proof of gravity?
Not, no, not as. Despite my friend trying to get me to concede gravity when objects fall at an accelerated rate toward the Earth, no.
So objects falling 9.8 meters per second, that you wouldn't class that as proof of gravity then?
No.
Oh, fair enough. What about a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the center of a presupposed spherical Earth? How you doing, Sleeping Warrior?
Yo.
None whatsoever.
What about gas pressure without a container?
I'll let Anthony answer this one.
You can't have a gas pressure without a container. It's in the definition. If you have a balloon with pressure in it and burst it, it doesn't maintain its position. It loses it. Come on, Nathan, you know this.
What about proof of distance to the sun? Measured.
None. I've got a really good video on that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. No. The answer to your question is no, of course. But I want you to, when we finish doing housekeeping, or maybe I should do it now while we're on that point.
Yeah, do it now.
It's just this. It's an astrophysicist girl that's quite young, and she's telling us how she knows how far away the stars are, or maybe how big they are to calculate how far away they are. Guess what? We can play a game. We can play a game of guess what the assumption is going to be. It's really good.
Can I guess already?
Yeah, go on.
Is it that? Well, I bet there's two assumptions. I bet the first assumption that Earth is a sphere with a given radius, and the second assumption would be that Venus is the same size as Earth. Am I right?
Yeah, you are close. It's along them lines. You can guess which assumption. We can all play a game of guess the assumption, right? And when we get the clip played, we can play spot the assumption, because in all of these clips, I've been trying to look for how they know all these distances and all that. There's at some point there's going to be an assumption, right? And it's always it's a game of spot the assumption. Where is it? Where's the bit where they say, "Well, we know blah blah blah," and then that'll be it. So technically speaking, no, you're not right, but you're not far wrong. That's all I'll say. Let me rig it up. Should I rejoin on Skype?
Yeah, go on if you need audio.
Yeah, this is great. All right, I'll drop from here and I'll rejoin on Skype.
No worries. Right, let's don't need any visuals.
Let's try this.
Just sound,
so
right?
Just get rid of everything else that I don't need. Right, share screens and sounds. All right, so try this.
Just need audio, right?
It needs audio.
Yeah, fine. Just do a quick sound check.
That work?
No.
Okay, let's try that again. Okay, let's. Oh no, that didn't work. Right, let's try that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
My name is Elaine.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll stop it at the point where the assumption's made. But let's play the game as though you've never seen it before. We're gonna spot the assumption, right?
Can I do a rolling intro? It's time for Spot the Assumption.
So, I will stop it at the point, but this is where we just pay attention. Like, listen to what she says. She's trying to determine the star's radius. Now, if you calculate the radius, then you can get the distance, but you need to know the distance to get the radius, right? So unless they've got some new spectacular way of calculating the radius, they don't know it, is the position, because they need either the distance to get the radius or the radius to get the distance. So we're looking for this new fantastic Marvel way of calculating the star's radius. And so let's play Spot the Assumption, and we'll see where it is.
And I'm an astrophysicist, and today we're going to answer how to determine the star radius. The first thing to know is that the star radius cannot be measured directly. The nearest star to us, besides our sun, is 4.4 light years away. So even with the best telescopes, it's still a point of light.
Did you hear what she just said then?
I'd say it's game over already.
Yeah, it's game over already. We can't measure them directly. The nearest the nearest star is 4 point some light years away. And then the last bit that she says is this bit.
So even with the best telescopes, it's still a point of light.
Even with the best telescopes, it's still a point of light. Let that sink in for a bit, but let's move on.
So we can't really tell how wide the radius of the star is.
Right. So we can't really tell how wide the radius of the star is.
But the stars behave as perfect radiators. And
They behave as perfect radiators? Really?
And what that means is that all the energy that they absorb, they re-radiate. And there is a nice temperature and luminosity relationship describing such radiators.
So we're going to be talking about the correlation between the temperature and the luminosity, according to this. All right? So she's now going to present a bit of maths, but listen to what she says now. It's glorious.
And this is the luminosity and temperature radiation. So this takes into account the surface area of the star, the Stefan-Boltzmann constant that has a value of 5.67 times 10 to the minus 8 watts per meter square, Kelvin to the fourth.
Now, if you're like me at this point, you're pretty much listening to psychobabble. It's like it's nonsense talk, but this is the point. Are you ready? Here comes the assumption.
And this is the luminosity of the star. So generally when we look at a star, we can tell how bright it is, and that's the luminosity. It's how much power we're getting from the star. We generally compare that to a star that we already know, so most likely it would be the sun.
There it is. So we know the sun, right? We know the star that we already know. So I wonder how they know the sun. So obviously it's coming back to the Venus assumption and the radius of R. So you were right indirectly, but she actually refers it to the sun, and no one knows the distance to the sun. So she's comparing something that is basically accepted to be the distance to the sun, but we all know that no one seems to know it. No one knows where they got the distance to the sun from. They know that it's calculated, and it's based on the presupposition that Venus is the same size as the Earth, and they've probably got a little bit of radar in there as well for the transit of Venus and stuff like that. But ultimately, nobody's measured any of the luminaries in the sky. And this is the same. This woman doesn't know what she's talking about, but she's been brainwashed that well that she knows the formula off the top of her head and she can write it backwards on a pane of glass. That's impressive. Anyway, that's the rest of it. She bases it all on the sun. The rest of it she calculates, and it's all maths and boring, but she bases it all on the sun.
Right. So in other words, I was giving her too much credit because she would have just said, well, we know the distance to the sun, and that would have been the end of her explanation if you were to quiz her on her source.
Yeah, you were giving her too much credit, but it's glorious. I mean, aside from the fact that she's fit, that was one of the reasons why I started to listen to what she said. But I looked at her and I thought she was too young, and I thought, this girl's not going to know anything. And I looked at some of her other videos, and all her other videos are well parroted. They're all official line. It's like listening to Sean Hufford, but obviously a little bit more pleasing on the eye, because she knows the official story bang on, and she can recite all the equations like GeoStreamer can, not realising that it's all pre-assumptive. It's ridiculous.
Easier on the eye. I'll have you know Sean's got a very fine pair of breasts.
He's probably got bigger breasts than this girl, actually. She looks quite flat chested, but point is, she's quite pretty, and that's what initially pricked my ears up. I was like, oh, hello, what are you doing in astrophysics? I thought, so are you going to tell me how you know the distance to a star then? How they measure the radius? And I just thought, let's see what she says. And it was there in glorious Technicolor. We know the distance to the sun. I was like, really?
We know the sun. All right, you've been there, have you, love? How was that holiday?
Transit of Venus, assumptions. No, it's great. So everything seems to be circular. Everything seems to. It's like what was the example you gave me recently? Where it was geology and fossils, wasn't it?
Oh right. How do you know how old the fossil is? Well, we know how old the layer of rock that it's in is. Oh, that's excellent. So you date it with the rock. Cool, cool. I'll go away happy that you know exactly how old that fossil is. Hang on a second. How do you know how old that rock layer is? Well, we gauge it by the fossils that we find in it. Love it.
So I just wanted to give this girl a shout out because she's great in terms of showing the official story, but it's naff in terms of quality and content. So, and I've just noticed that Pete Shea's in chat. So let's get him on the panel at some point, Nath. I think he's
jump back on.
He's due an apology. But...
I've only got one housekeeping question left, and you'll pick up on exactly what it is when you jump back on the Hangout, and then I'll just so I don't have to monitor the Skype. So if you can jump back in, that'd be brilliant. So are you there, Travis? Hopefully so.
I'm still here.
Ace! Right. Last but not least, any evidence of the presupposition itself? Any evidence of R?
Well, there's lots of evidence that they presuppose it, yeah.
No. No.
Oh.
Evidence
Oh,
of Earth radius, my friend.
No.
Just got some mutters. Any evidence of Earth radius?
None.
None. Yeah, agreed.
No, sorry, the dog just started barking for no reason.
No
No evidence of the presuppositional radius. It's all, sticks in the ground, isn't it? Aristophanes, is that the best that they've got?
Well, you can take it back from beyond that because obviously he made the assumption when he put his sticks in the ground, and he used logical deduction that a shadow in the light, a shadow on a light in the sky, meant that we had a curved Earth, i.e., a spherical Earth. So he started with that logical deduction and went on to make his measurement using the presupposition of R. Anyway, I've put out an all points bulletin to audience members. So Reds, who's how can I put it into an analogy? So he's flapped over the pond for too long, and eventually I've caught him by the leg. And when I've caught him, I've managed to insert an R value inside his person, metaphorically speaking, of course. So that's been stuffed well and truly deep into R, even though he's not actually joined the Hangout. So now he's in a position where, should he ever be of the opinion that he needs to pull that R back out again and show it to the world covered in crap, then he can, but I want to know about it so I can tell the world exactly where he's bleeding and where he got it from and who stuffed it there.
So, with regards to Pete, join Pete. Let's hear what you've got to say. I'm hoping that you're going to come out with an apology, given that your standard of evidence seems to be the word of some bloke, given that the word of same bloke has said that she doesn't wear a prosthetic mask. I'm expecting you to apologise for ruining the show the other day and for slurring somebody based on crappy evidence, Pete. So feel free, join. We won't kick you. Well, might do. Where were we?
Presuppositional value of R. If any audience member sees Red's rhetoric using the presuppositional value of R, I'd like to be made aware of it.
Sorry, did I derail that point then? I thought you were finished.
That you just asked where we were. That's where we are.
So we're looking for R, and it's up Red's rhetoric. Is it up Red's rhetoric's ass, or is it up GeoStreamers? I can't remember where it was left.
It's currently inserted into Red's rectum.
Red's rectal rhetoric. Well,
yep.
It's funny how he's asking you to prove R, but that's our point. Why would he be asking us to prove his argument?
The old burden of proof reversal. It's the title of the show.
So the old burden of proof reversal. It's not up for us to prove our science. It's up for you to disprove it. Really?
Yeah, the burden of proof. He who asserts must prove.
Well, I've got news for you, buddy. He who asserts must prove. You're held to the same standard that Pete Shea gets held to. If you have evidence to prove your position, And prove is the key word, not just support. I mean, it helps if you've got something to support your position. At least being wrong then is okay. I mean, we all get things wrong. We all get good and bad evidence. And I make mistakes like everybody else does. But you're not going to make mistakes with R, are you? It's one of the most fundamental principles of the whole scientific model that you guys worship and believe. So where is it? Can we see it?
Yeah, we don't need to see it. We've seen it, exposed it, now it's been stuffed up red. So when he uses it again, it means he's got to pull it back out to use it. And that's the bit I want to be aware of, so I can laugh at him.
Being compared to Pete Shea Reds. Pete makes assertions without evidence, and you seem to be doing it too. And so do all your ball worshipping believers. You all believe in R. Everything comes back to R, which ultimately goes back to a bloke with some sticks and the sun. And you lot seem to have based a whole model about it. And on that calculation that could equally go the opposite way if you don't pre-assume that we live on a sphere, then all of a sudden you've got a whole segment of society that thinks that we live on a sphere because the whole body of science tells us so. And what do you know? When you go and look at it, doesn't seem to be any evidence to support it, just fiction, science fiction, scientism, nonsense.
So I'll give an example of a burden of proof reversal. Hopefully my kid's screaming can't be heard too much through the mic. She's having a bit of a paddy. The burden of proof reversal has been used loads recently. So I'm going to give you a scenario. You know, you're standing around and you've got the propane delivery man coming to your house and he's got his gas canisters full of gas pressure. Oh, everything okay?
Yeah.
He's got his gas canisters and they're full of gas pressure. And you're having a little chat with him and you say, oh, wow, these are great, you know, pressurized containers that we've got here. And the guy says to you, you do realize we live on a sphere. This is the propane delivery man. And you say, you what? And the propane man says, yeah, we live on a sphere. The Earth is a sphere. And we travel out to the moon. Did you see it? It was on the news. So you look at the propane delivery man and say, well, how do you have pressure without a container? You look up at the sky, having just been told that men go to space, and say, how do you have pressure without a container? Now, at this point, there's been an assertion made by the propane delivery man. The Earth is a sphere, and we travel to the moon in rockets. And then there's been a reply, a question in regards to that claim from the recipient of the propane. And he said, well, how do you, one making the assertion, have gas pressure without a container? So the propane man scratches his head and he says, where's your container? And the guy buying the propane goes, what are you talking about? What container? I'm not making any assertions here. I'm asking you about your assertion, about your globe that you think you live on that's an open system. Because as far as I was aware, there's a vacuum of space. So how do you, globehead faith believer, with your assertion of a spherical Earth and it being in a vacuum, how do you have gas pressure without a container? And the propane man does the same. He scratches his head and he says, show me the container. That's the burden of proof reversal.
Yeah, they're doing that a lot recently, aren't they? They don't like that definition. The fact is, you can look up 10 definitions of gas pressure and find that 9 of them mention the word container, and you have to really rummage for the one that doesn't. And when you find the one that doesn't, it gives a very similar description, and it may not use the word container, but it'll talk about, say, maybe a membrane or some other similar description that provides a barrier between you and it. And I think there is one that talks about a vertical column of air. But if it's the case that science has all the evidence and gas pressure is defined by science, wouldn't you really expect science to have one agreed upon, universally accepted definition for gas pressure, rather than having all these ones that are very, 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 very similar? I mean, it's not hard. Where's the evidence that you can have a gas pressure without something to house it? How do you show that? Because if you pop a balloon, it bursts. The gas disperses. Entropy is a thing. So how is it any different to the vacuum of space? If you have a 14 psi at sea level, how does that exist in a vacuum without the atmosphere being sucked off? It can't. So how does it happen? Gravity. Prove gravity. Can't prove gravity. Therefore, there must be a container, because that's your alternative explanation. And we know that there's no evidence of gravity. We know that there is no evidence of gravity. Not just proof, evidence. Everything that we see is explained perfectly by density over buoyancy, one or the other. and it's relative. That's where we get the perception of up and down from. It's relative state. So you can have objects that are suspended in a state of equilibrium and will not move. Force a disequilibrium for whatever reason, because you pick it up for whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you will watch it realign itself if it can. Now, Arwin would say that's realigning of the density buoyancy ratio. But what that really means is it's going back to a state of equilibrium if it can. Now, if you drop something and it goes, quotes, down, the reason why it's going down is because it's too dense for the air that it sits in. It's usually a solid because it's a rock or whatever. And you're going to drop it because it's going to displace. It's too heavy for the air it sits in. But if the thing that you pick up was the same density as the environment that you're in, like a helium balloon that's got a mix of oxygen and helium in it so that it sits in a state of equilibrium, when you let go of that helium balloon, it's going to go neither up nor down, and it'll remain where it is, and you can test it yourself. So the question becomes, well, why does it not go up nor down? And the answer, of course, is because it's in a state of equilibrium. And that equilibrium is the reason why everything happens. If it's in a state of equilibrium, it'll not move. If it's disequilibrium and it can move, it will. Why? Who knows? Is there a force there? No, because you can't identify one. All you see is displacement, and it seems to be a natural law of nature. Everything seems to form or balance itself out with equilibrium if it's able to move. All the gases do it. Anyway, I digress. There is no evidence of gravity. Okay? There's only evidence that we can demonstrate and manipulate and cause effects with density over buoyancy. There is nothing further than that. Nobody can see it. Nobody can manipulate it. Nobody can vary it. Nobody can document it or evidence it. It only exists in your mind because science has brainwashed you into believing it. So back to gas pressure. If gravity is the requisite requirement for proving that you can have a density gradient or a pressure gradient without a container, but you can't prove gravity, that's no different to calculating the radius of a star, basing it on the pre-assumption that you know the distance to the sun, because you're assuming one in both instances. You're assuming you know the distance to the sun, and you're assuming that gravity is a thing. Well, what about if it's not? Remove them out of it, and then you're left with density over buoyancy, and you're still left with, well, like what she said at the beginning of the clip, it's just a light source. How much further does it need to go? That's all we can see. They flicker. They make weird shapes that look like a frequency of some kind. That's about as far as we can tell. Are they millions of light years away? No. They just look like lights. They're not moving because they seem to be embedded in the whatever, and the whatever is moving minuscule amounts. And I don't mean it's moving. I mean it's just flexing. It's probably caused by the sun and the heat from the sun. It's just causing a little tiny flexation over a long period of time that you morons think's parallax because they're millions and millions and millions of miles away. No, we can't prove nothing about the sky. Can't get to it. Can't touch it. It's all fantasy. And if you're going to base it all on assumptions, we live in a solar system. If you're not going to assume anything, you're limited to what you can see and what you can accept. And the reality is we can't prove any of these things because we can't do anything to test that they're even real. Can't prove tangibility, can't prove distances, can't prove sizes. We just see lights. That's it. And they're moving. That's it.
Just want
We're
to say
stationary. How do you know? Because we don't feel any movement. That's all you can tell. It doesn't have to be any more hard than that. Occam's razor is quite valuable in this case because we don't have to make any assumptions. We see things because we see them, not because they've been loomed up and all that nonsense. It's ridiculous. I'm done, Nathan, if you want to interject.
Cool. So, for all idiots in chat that haven't got an intellect beyond that of a 7-year-old, direction is relative. And in this instance, it's relative to its density. So if you have something that is considerably less dense in a medium that is more dense, it will go up. If it's the reverse, it will go down. It's simple. That direction is only relative to the item that's moving. So everybody that thinks, oh, down is down, only to you, bonehead. It's relative to you specifically. Yeah, direction's relative. Simple.
It all comes back to what we can prove. And ultimately, evidence is more important than rhetoric. Rhetoric's a nice story. But like a lot of things, stories are all nice when they're told by somebody that's in control. I mean, we all got told about the war, who won it, why we won it. Who really knows what went on in that war? All we do know is that lots of people died, and we don't really know why, because most people don't really understand what went on with it being so long ago. But we're told a nice just so story that may or may not be true, but we don't know. We're just told what we're told, and it's a story. It's the same for the Earth. We don't really know. They probably know, but they're not telling us because there's too many inconsistencies with the story. We can see way too far. Speaking of seeing way too far, have you seen that latest video, Nathan? The 500-mile missing curvature of a huge amount.
Yeah, stick it up. We don't need the audio from it, so if you want to just stick it up, I'll present it and it can just play through. Before you do, though, I just want to check. I did actually ask the guys for permission, so if you can give me 30 seconds, I'll just check if I have actually got permission to play it. If I have,
sure.
Then great.
Well, whilst he's checking to see that we can play it, I got a phone call last night from a neutral friend. He's neither ball nor flat, but I don't think he likes putting his name to stuff, so I'm not going to say who. Might be wrong, but I'll protect his identity for the purposes of not knowing which way he sits on this. But he rang and he just said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "I have." And he said, "Why have you not covered it yet?" And partly because I wanted to see what other people said about it. I didn't want to be the first one to commit to it. But my own view on this infrared camera, 30,000 feet observation that what's J. Tolan Media, I think it's called, is that either he's not at the elevation he says and he's higher, or the Earth's flat. That's the way I see it. So the guy starts with the assertion that he's flying.
Sorry, that's my fault. I know it'll be better resolution if I can bring it up on my screen, so I'm going to do exactly that now. He has given me permission, fortunately, so I'll just stick it up while you're talking.
Cool. I mean, it's like any claim. You have to validate the claim. You have to validate the claim. So the claim is that he sees 500 miles. Now, I'm not too sure on his location, but it seems legit. But it's for the ballers really to prove that he's not seeing the 500 miles. Because if he is seeing that 500 miles and he is at roughly the height he says he is, that's a whole lot of curvature that's missing there, gents, and it can't be seen.
I'm going to stick this link into the chat feed just so people can check it out for themselves. Get an idea of what this guy's showing. Thumbs up as well. See if I can get a bit bigger. Keep an eye out, Anthony, if you will, because I've got it. I can't keep an eye on the Hangout and have this video playing. I didn't expect it to be quite this quiet. I might put some of his volume on as Anthony's completely disappeared.
Did you guys hear about the people in the ISS update?
Shout out to They Lie Ohio, who kind of, I'm not going to say switched us on to this video, but he certainly got in touch and said, "Why haven't you covered it yet? This is my thoughts and feelings on it." And Anthony essentially almost verbatim parroted the words of They Lie Ohio when he said, "Look, the guy's either lying about his height or the Earth's flat." Now, I'm sorry if you don't want me to put that out publicly, They Lie Ohio, but those were your exact words, which does leave you some wiggle room to say that it's the incorrect height, but he's at cruising altitude as far as I'm aware, so that seems unlikely, and there's no other mountain ranges in the near vicinity to match up with, so it's either the mountain range that he thinks it is, or I don't really have another explanation actually. I don't know if anyone on the panel is going to come up with a better explanation, but that's as far as it is, as far as I can say. It is what it is, sort of thing.
So Michael Bomer in chat says, "I thought the burden of proof is on the one with the claim of seeing 500 miles. And indeed that is true. That is the position. If you're going to claim you can see 500 miles, you've got to present some evidence that supports your position. And the burden of proof does indeed lie on the person making the claim. However, he has produced the evidence. Whether he's right about the evidence or not is the question. You have to validate the claim. The claim is he sees a mountain range that is that far away that he thought it was a cloud, which then brings into question, well, why did he mistake it as a cloud? And the answer, of course, is because it's in the sky. It looks like a cloud, but it turns out that he's looking at a mountain and he's seeing the snow on top of it, I guess. But in any event, the evidence has been provided. Now it's a question of, well, is the claim correct? And you can see that he's looking at what looks like mountains right now on screen. And it appears that, well, if he can identify these mountains in this instance, then he has something else in the far background that he can line it up with. So you've got in the middle ground, you've got this big set of, looks like 3 peaks. But look in the right in the far background, what looks like little wisps on the horizon, or actually above the horizon. That's this claim, and he has produced evidence. Is he right? Who knows? That's why we're covering it. But I'm going to go with he probably is right, because as far as I can see, there's nothing else that's in that area or along that line of sight that it could possibly be that will be big enough. There's it seems to be a mountain in the middle of nowhere. So I would assert that the guy's claim stands up. He now puts on screen, he shows what he can see, and he shows his line of sight. And I don't really see that much wrong with the claim. Now, am I going to assert that it's true? Probably, because he has produced evidence that supports his position. Is it true? Well, that's down to the ballers, isn't it? We can only say that we think this is true based on the evidence. So he does have the burden. He has produced the evidence that supports his position. Is it proof? That's down to the ballers. But it looks like it's flat.
It is flat. That's
Yeah.
a pancake.
As a pancake, yeah. So
Um,
I'd like to. Oh, and by the way, look at how much curvature is being shown in the picture right now. You can see how much curves on screen, and you can see that that doesn't exist in the horizon pic in the actual video. Look how far he's going though. It's absolutely incredible, and I think this P900 mod is really going to change the game for Flat Earth massively in its favor. Because let's be honest, there is no evidence to support curve.
How long before someone does that mod to the P1000, do you think?
I don't know. You got to have balls the size of brass monkeys to be able to do that to £1,000 worth of camera, though, right?
I know there's got to be people out there that have got enough money to do it.
It's an incredible. Yeah, that's better. It's an incredible observation, and I can't see how anybody can explain that away on a sphere, because I mean, the horizon looks flat as a pancake. But look at how far he can see. He ain't looking over no ball there, boys and girls. Flat. The only thing that's missing out of his claim is the elevation details, the height. It's hard to know exactly what the height is at, but he would need to be at like 100,000 feet to be able to see this and looking behind the ball. I mean, I don't even know that 100,000 feet is enough. I haven't done the maths to check that, so that's just a wild assertion based on how much it looks out.
Oh, I lost guests in the hangout.
Oh, I don't see that.
Any chance you can bring it up? I've got the bits that I wanted to be put on in high resolution. I've got on in high resolution, and I'm happy. But if you can play it and screen share it, it just means that I can keep an eye on the hangout, which I currently can't do.
I do have the. Why have you seen somebody join then?
No, nothing like that. But I'm completely blind to the hangout at the moment. So.
Well, I'm watching it, so I don't know whether it's better for me to watch it and you just leave it on, or whether it's better for me to.
I can leave it on, but you know, ideally, if you can share it, I'd be much happier.
Okay.
But yeah, I've got the bits that I wanted on in decent quality, so people could make them out, and I had it full screen at the right moment. You know, I've practiced beforehand, so I've got it all queued up. But yeah, I'm happy with what we've shown, but just so it's playing in the background as well on the rest of the show and the next, it's just, you know, it's just easier.
Did you watch all of it last night?
I didn't watch all of it, no. I watched a good chunk, though.
What timestamp roughly were you on then? About 33 minutes, 30 seconds.
40, the best bits are like 47 minutes, 46 minutes, I think. Just after he shows the map is where he just zooms in and out again. You can see exactly what he's showing. Doing it now. Big one last time.
There you go.
You got it.
Autonomous playing.
Oh, great. I'll pause mine and switch over to you. That's better. So I can just, I can keep an eye on it, but in lower resolution. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's no cloud.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can see why he mistook it as a cloud initially, but when you take
definitely. When it was
more look at
blurry.
it, pardon?
When it was all blurry, it's like when Ranty does it, because you both video stuff rather than just take stills. It's hit and miss with stills, but it's running at 30 frames a second, so you're going to have a much higher chance of catching 1 or 2 frames that are really clear.
I don't know how the ballers are going to be able to explain this one away. They're going to have to lie about his elevation and put him at 100,000 feet, which we all know is nonsense. At least 100,000 feet, probably more. Or they're going to have to say that it's a cloud, a smudge.
Yeah, but we're still back to the same issue with the angular resolution. That is that the
Hi,
mountain.
Isaiah. How you doing?
How's it going, guys?
Good to have you.
The mountain is not going to be at a 90-degree angle. It's going to be angling away. If you're up at 100,000 feet, it's even going to be more pronounced. You can't argue then that the percentage of the curve is so small.
So what's being debated right now? I see some infrared footage of some flight someone took.
Basically, it seems to be an extremely powerful argument against the sphere that we live on, that he seems to be seeing a mountain range that's that far away. It should be way behind the curve of the Earth by huge amounts, and we should never, ever, 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 ever see it.
What's the distance on that?
500 miles.
Jesus.
Yeah. Oops.
500 miles?
That's the claim.
That should be well obscured, huh?
We've got to get somebody to write lyrics for the new Proclaimers song, I Would Curve 500 Miles.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good stuff. Did you guys already take care of housekeeping today?
We did.
Yeah,
Why? Have you got a debunking of something or an evidence of something, rather?
It's so good.
Let's have it. What you got? What you got?
He's still here. He may have dropped. Have I dropped?
No, you're still on
No.
here.
Nathan might have dropped.
No, I'm still here. I thought you said you had something to offer evidence for one of the housekeeping points. Who is it? Is it chocolate?
No.
No.
Padilla.
What you got? Let us have it.
Any scientific evidence of dust on the shelf?
Dust on the shelf? What do you mean?
This was a previous hangout. They were just debating something about dust on the shelf. You remember that, Nathan?
I vaguely remember it. Wasn't it
Vaguely.
something to do with the gravity argument?
Yeah, dust
Something like
attracting to the shelf because it's a bigger mass.
Yes, the idea is that dust would settle on the shelf because it's denser than the air that it sits in, and it just drops. It displaces the air below it because it's more dense than it. It's a natural consequence of displacement where an object's in a disequilibrium.
Any evidence of axial rotation of the ball variety?
Just for Arwin in chat, there's no evidence that there was no static electricity argument whatsoever. No, there's no evidence of that. No, mate.
And where's Arwen? Arwen's been a little. I don't know if he's like 100% flat Earth anymore. Like, I mean, he is, but something about gravity. Was it again?
Well, to be honest, Mark Taylor said in my latest video that Arwen and Pete Shea were their two best weapons, and I tend to agree with that. I actually think that Arwen might be sent here as a troll, because I don't know how he can maintain his position when he understands and accepts that there is no evidence for his position, but he asserts it to be true anyway. It's like, come on. You may as well be Pete Shea, asserting stuff about people that you don't know, but based on whatever evidence that you accept, which is pretty crappy, and telling people it's true.
Yeah, so I'm talking with a friend of mine on Facebook right now, and I have to be honest with you. The conversation that I'm having with him about
Hold on a second,
gravity
Travis.
and
Hold on.
force.
Hold on. FE Astronomy, is that really you?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good to have you.
I was just about to kick you then, my friend. Well done for speaking up.
So I've got a friend that I'm talking with, and I scratch my head and I feel like I'm talking to Arwen, because we're talking about force equals mass times acceleration. And, no matter how much I simply describe objects of mass falling, his insertion of G for the acceleration, he has no justification for it. Every time I ask him to qualify the insertion of G, he's like, you wouldn't have acceleration without it.
Yeah. So, Mike, I assume you've seen this video before? I know it's recent, but what's your impressions of it?
Sorry, did you ask that question to me?
Indeed.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat it? I wasn't listening.
Just general opinions of this video. I assume you've watched it already, right?
Yeah. We're having JT on our meeting this Wednesday today. So I'd love to talk to him directly and pick his brain on what he's actually seeing and how he came to the conclusion. So yeah, I think it's awesome footage.
For anybody who's watching this footage going, I don't understand all the hype. What's the hype? It's just, it looks grainy, it's black and white. Why is this fantastic footage? Well, it's sheer distance. It's not artistic quality that we're going for with any of these images. So if people want to criticise them for their artistic quality, it'll just be quickly ignored. Calling it blurs and smudges. It's like, okay, you can establish what it is, and it's a vast, vast distance away. Now, that's not to say that it's not going to be debunked and someone's going to come along and give a reasonable explanation on the ball for it. They might. I doubt it. But they might. You just don't know. We'll see what people come up with. But for me, this conversation that was had between Anthony, myself, and Thale Ohio yesterday, I had to say to them that, I've seen this before. Now, I had to qualify it because obviously your eyes don't have a zoom function. But having done thousands, tens of thousands of hours on planes doing international travel, on a very, very rare occasion, you would get this with the naked eye. Now, that is to say that what you're cutting through is all of the atmospheric crap to get these shots with infrared. But on a very rare occasion, you can see a completely clear day from high altitude on a plane. So long as you're looking, you can see this. It doesn't happen all the time. Obviously, it's not a regular occurrence, but I remember one specific example when flying over Russia, and this is what I saw. It looked like this. A vast expanse for what I, at the time, sort of roughly worked out with a couple of other people to be maybe 300 miles of visibility on a completely crisp day. But I've no doubt whatsoever that, you can see for miles and miles and miles and miles. But yeah, like I say, the view I would have been presented with would be exactly the same as when he zooms back out again. So he's looking through the window like this, basically. That's what, I've seen this. And your eyes can resolve an amazing amount of information. So seeing this through the window with your naked eye when you're on a plane, no one's doing that. They're all looking at the seat backs. They're looking at the latest movie that's not in the cinemas yet. They're listening to music and radio from the headphones that are garbage and trying to get some sleep or get drunk. Nobody's looking out the window. Even if they are, they'll take an occasional glance. Me, I was stood at the emergency exit by where they're cooking up all the food and drink for the passengers, and I was looking out that window because it had a wider angle. You could get a wider angle through it, whereas when the seats are in front and behind you in your actual passenger seat, you haven't got any angle. You're trapped in this tiny little space. But at the back, you could get a really wide angle on what you could see and stuff your head right up against the glass and have a good look around at what's below you. And that's all it took for me. That cemented itself in my mind and will never go away. It's left an indelible impression of the flat Earth that you can observe with your own eyes. You can get these kind of views. You've just got to look. Most of the time, it's just cloud. If you said to somebody, well, have you been on a plane? Did you get this view? They'll say, no, I just got to see a load of cloud. Because that's what you get 99% of the time. But in the same way as Anthony and Ranty go out and on a good day, it's a good day. Other days they're not. You've got loads of atmospheric interference. The limitation is purely down to the atmospheric conditions, so you don't see very far. And the same is said from the air. But that's not to say that you don't get extreme clarity from the air on a rare occasion, and you get to see stuff like this with your own eyes. It's fantastic. But it's one of those things that I've said in many shows and interviews and discussions that I've had, well, what's your proof? Well, I've seen it. I've done a lot of international travel and I've looked out and seen the flat plane below. And this reminds me of one of those occasions specifically, like I say, flying over Russia and seeing the flat plane below and going, my God, at the time I was a globehead like everyone. I was as indoctrinated as everyone else. And what went through my mind was, I wish I could get higher. It looks so flat. If only I could get higher to see the curve. That was what was going through my mind at the time. But then you've only got to hear someone like Math Powerland utter the words flat Earth, that not in ridicule, but as an actual concept of reality. And this was what flashed in my mind. The exact view. Not this, obviously. I didn't have this. I'm not taking this journey. But you know what I'm getting at. This was what went through my mind. I was like, yeah, I've seen it. It's flat as a pancake, as far as the eye can see. Anyway, incredible. That's my little babble and my take on this footage, because it did definitely make me reminisce.
So, Effie Astronomy, I remember your name because in the George Netanuk thread where he was talking about BM that he claimed was Bill Miller, did you see how many times that he basically says that he posted it, and then it was like 3 days after he said he did it, and it wasn't contemporaneous to maximize the exposure? The thread that you started, that I commented in, that he put the BM comment in, it was not the thread that he cited for the proof of the Bill Miller claim, which was a different thread with the Bill Miller name in it. So when I saw the Bill Miller comment, I didn't know that it was said in a different thread that BM meant Bill Miller. I only saw it in your thread where it didn't mention Bill Miller. Have you got any views on that one? Do you feel in the need to laugh at George? Because it's always a good day when you laugh at George Netanuk.
Yeah. Well, George has exposed himself as one of the most disingenuous liars on the ball side. He regularly touts his degrees, and basically downplaying everybody else's degrees because only his degrees matter. I'm a well-educated individual, and I'm a degreed engineer, but you don't see me going around boasting that. I do have a degree. I have several degrees, but doesn't make me any less or any more smarter than Joe Average, And just a sec, guys. My kids are coming up.
Yeah, I've got to back that. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you've gone through the indoctrination process in a specific subject matter that you are any more educated on the matters of what's on screen right now, for the sake of example. You can only assess it on its merits, and anybody can assess anything on its merits.
I've been having a discussion with Sly Sparkane on his latest video about laser tests. He made a video claiming that low surface level laser tests are basically bunk because of the distortion that's happening near the surface. And I agree with that, actually, but he stated in the same video that the Hawking's experiment, for example, was high enough, and they didn't suffer refraction because of that altitude above the surface. Well, I then shared our laser measurements and our elevation above the water surface, which was higher than the Hawking's experiment. So by logical deduction of Sly, there is no refraction in our experiments, and the discussion, you should look it up. It's actually quite funny because he's dancing around that argument, and I just put the fire on his shoes. Our laser was at least double the height of the Hawking's experiment, and he then went on to find different errors, in the experiment setup itself. But talking to these guys, they basically show that they have zero experience in field research and engineering itself. They make assumptions based on their logical deduction without asking the questions to the guys that actually did the experiment. So they're making faulty assumptions, and they don't understand the process. He said that the Hawking's experiment, for example, they measured the height of the beam along the way, and we didn't do that. But he doesn't seem to understand that the device we created actually removes that requirement, because just by its design itself. I could elaborate on it if you guys want to, but the laser aiming device, we call it the SALAD, the super accurate laser aiming device, was specifically designed to remove the requirement of measuring the height of your beam over the water by a process of elimination with refracted and actual measured angles. And if you understand how that works with regards to the trigonometry involved, now the SALAD device would not work if the Earth was not flat, or the surface we are shooting across is not flat, because it's using a GPS trigonometry system that automatically points the laser to a specific location, and that only works if the Earth is flat, because we find a reference location and we level the laser at the reference location, and the reference location is a lot closer than the actual target location. And the way we find the target location is by pure horizontal panning. And if the reference location, for example, is 8 miles out or 5 miles out, and the target location is 25 miles out, it should not be on the same horizontal plane when we pan over to the new location. But these guys, they don't seem to grasp that.
They don't understand what a level transit is. That's
no,
we've come
exactly.
across.
And if you have a target location at, say, 5 miles, and you level your laser, you put the beam at the exact height as the source itself, and then you pan over to your 25 miles location, by definition, the beam should have risen. But we never ever had any elevation in the beam when we pan horizontally, apart from maybe a meter, but that's just the tolerance, the error margin of the horizontal alignment of the device itself. Now,
the thing is with the refraction argument, we can afford to give them the refraction argument, even if they didn't. Our position is that they can't prove that the refraction even occurs, right? And they demand that it does, right? But let's just say, for argument's sake, that we gave them refraction. That don't make it sphere.
Hold on. I've got to interject there. I'm really sorry. So Sly has got absolutely no place discussing the merits of the type of refraction and the conditions that are involved in refraction, because he's fixed in the type of refraction that they use and apply. It's called terrestrial refraction, 7/6 of the Earth's radius. So Sly does this all the time. What about this? What about that? Well, you're not applying any of that. All you're applying is terrestrial refraction, an assertion that light bends around the radius of the Earth, 7/6 of that radius. That's terrestrial refraction. That's what they apply. Anything further to that or beyond that is nonsense, because it's not their assertion. 7/6R, terrestrial refraction.
What they do is they assert it, but we actually put a method in the experiment itself to eliminate the possibility of refraction by having a calculated angle change towards an observed angle change. And if you are working with a refracted beam, what you change at the source should not correspond with what you see on the other side. You get it? There's an incidence angle and a refracted angle. And if you are working with a refracted beam, when you move your beam at a specific angle at the source, if it's refracted, then it should not correspond on the other side with the exact height difference. But it does, every step that we move the laser up or down was exactly as it calculated out. So there is no refraction going on. And we actually added the calculated refraction by the Snell's law calculations we put in the document. But there's no mention of that.
Right.
Ever.
And when the Globers do it, none of that's applicable, none of that's measured, none of that's taken into account. It's just an arbitrary 7.6R.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was falling over the fact that in the document that we published, there was a brief description of the calibration process of the cellular device itself. Basically, we put in the document that we aimed the laser at the horizon to landmarks, and then after it got dark, we found the reference location. But that's just basically a short summary of what actually goes on for calibrating the device itself, because the device itself, it would not work if it's not completely level on all sides. That includes the device itself, but the beam also. They are not level, exactly level down to the micrometer, then the GPS targeting system would not work. It requires the device and the beam to be exactly level.
So you're essentially validating a level transit with an object that you can pan through that level transit, and if it wasn't level, it wouldn't give a return.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So you've confirmed it's a level transit, and by doing that, you confirm the Earth is flat. You can't achieve that level transit on a sphere. It is impossible.
Exactly. And you get it right off the bat, and you don't even have to have the complex description of the experiment itself. Just the horizontal panning alone proves that there is no freaking curvature.
Absolutely. You've got a level transit because it's level. It's flat.
Yeah, you can do the same thing with zoom. If you zoom into and out of the horizon, you should see it rise and fall as a consequence of you getting closer and further away to the bulge or the horizon bulge or whatever they're going to call it. The fact that it doesn't do that, again, proves that it has to be a level plane.
Yeah. Yes. And yesterday, I think it was yesterday evening show, somebody challenged you, Anthony, about doing a test with a theodolite. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the distance required to do that test? Because if you're using a theodolite over 100 meters, you're already stretching its specified limit.
Yeah, absolutely correct.
There is a limit to how far you can use that tool and still be accurate.
I want to just do a quick shout out along that line. Sorry to interrupt. So, I think it's just called Flat Earth Perth. He used to be called Fepe Perth, but Flat Earth Perth has been covering perspective in great detail. And what you've just said, it is Mike, isn't it? I've got your name right, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Mike has just said, in essence, backs up what Fepe Perth or Flat Earth Perth has been doing, which is a demonstration that the way it's rigged by people like Jesse when they use theodolites is that they ignore perspective. Now, this is something we covered a couple of months ago as well. We hammered this well and truly home, hopefully, to our audience. But there's other people that are doing the same and doing actual physical demonstrations of how the perspective works, what the theodolite does. And he does a very simple test. He lines something up with 3 or 4 Jenga blocks, shows that when you line it up with effectively the line being your transit, you look across that, you can show that it's perfectly flat. But then you go alongside it, or look down the line of it rather, and you can see that they're falling away. And you could say, oh, that's Earth curve. Well, he's doing these examples on a flat table. And then he goes and does the opposite angle, shows it coming back the other way to show that there isn't actually a slope on the table. But in essence, you need to actually angle the theodolite down to account for perspective. But this isn't what they're doing when they use these, 20, 30 times zoom theodolites. They're doing it over about 20 meters. So it completely eradicates.
You only have to read the manual of a theodolite to see how much accuracy you get over a specific distance.
And it's short.
That just basically limits your measurements. And the same goes for auto levels. All the surveying equipments or surveying tools are all made for short distances. They are not made for long distance.
Absolutely.
We've been getting the complaints and sort of the arguments that we haven't used any surveying equipment, because they're useless when you're
Absolutely.
doing long distance measurements. That's
Correct.
why we created the Salad device, to remove the need for any measuring tools.
Yeah,
It is a measuring tool.
These tools are useful for surveying because they've got enough zoom to overcome, now they would say in the textbooks, overcome refraction. I say bollocks, they're overcoming perspective with that amount of zoom over a very short distance. So they overcome the disadvantages of perspective by using zoom and a very short distance. And you only have to look at a surveying manual to know that they're not doing it over a mile. But that's what Jesse will do. He'll look over a mile and say, look, it's below the line. You're like, no, that's about as disingenuous as it gets. That's perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I have to agree. And, Chris Maitre, who's also a member of VCOR, he's a very, very experienced surveyor, and we've been discussing, what's going on with surveying a lot and why these guys are actually convinced that they are living on a sphere. And I will probably butcher Chris's argument, but Chris makes it very clear. All the distances they measure exact, and the distortion comes after they've put in the data. Then they superimpose that onto a sphere. So all the measurements are distorted because they superimpose it on top of a sphere. That's how you get those distances, but they are most likely not exact distances. And we've just developed a new experiment that we're going to do in 10 days in the United States. It's a short distance experiment, and we're going to test it ourselves first to see if the method is solid and the results are also solid. And then we're going to publish the document and put out a challenge to all surveyors and everybody that wants to use that equipment to do or repeat our test and find that there is no freaking curvature.
Absolutely awesome. We're going to take a short break. So with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. If you hated the show, then you know exactly what to do. But if you like the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you've not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!